Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning or evening, depending on where you might be coming from. My name is Matt Cornwell. I'm the Associate Director for Student Services within the Saunders College of Business at RIT. We're very happy to have you here today for this is actually our one of our final sessions within our MBA Grad Chat series, an alumni panel. We have a great group of folks here, three individuals, RIT alumni, here to share their experiences through their graduate business programs. Just a couple highlights. If you do need any captioning, there is that modality at the bottom of your Zoom screen, so feel free to turn that on if you do need it. We also will take questions, so feel free to put those in the chat at any point. We'll address those as we work through the session, but that's why we're here. That's why these folks are here. So we definitely want to address any questions that you all might have. Without further ado, let's get started. Mayank, I'll start with you if you could introduce yourself and we'll work our way around.
Sure. Hey everyone. My name is Mayank Bindal and I'm an MBA 2012 graduate from Saunders College of Business. I originally did my undergrad in India in economics actually before coming to RIT. I worked in India for 5 years before coming here. And one of the main reasons for me to select RIT at that point was that I had few friends in RIT. I could gauge a lot of interest in terms of tech innovations, a lot of companies which are coming to RIT at that time. Um, so it, I was actually trying to pivot my career towards more tech focused, and then that's the reason I decided to come to RIT. And after I completed my MBA, I initially started off in healthcare industry, worked in New York City area with different healthcare insurance companies like Emblem Health, Visiting Nurse Services of New York. And then after 5 years, I actually got into consulting. I joined KPMG. Um, I left KPMG as a manager in 2022 and then joined a smaller consulting firm 3 years ago, uh, now called High Spring Consulting. So that's where I am as a senior manager. One of the great things about RIT, I felt was that it could prepare me in terms of what the corporates were looking for at that time. Um, I especially was able to get involved in a lot of activities. I was president of the Financial Management Association. I think it was called Financial Management Association, FMA. So I could get a lot of that exposure. I could build great contacts, and I think that was really the key for me to get into the corporate kind of roles here within the industry. So that was I think the biggest learning for me at RIT. In addition to all the coursework I did, of course.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Chris, I'll go to you next.
Sure. My name is Chris Rosen. I am currently the Director of Product Management in IBM Cloud. I am responsible for kind of our cloud native capabilities that work with customers doing things, building on containers or AI or things like that. So pretty exciting. My journey starts back directly out of high school. I came to RIT and I got a Bachelor of Science in Information Technology as my undergrad degree. I graduated in June of 2000. During that time, and the main driver for me to go to RIT, well, one, just kind of the community and everything that I fell in love with when I visited the campus. But then the co-op and internship program being a key component to that. So when I was there, this was back when it was still a quarter system. So I did one quarter, a co-op with a company up in New York. And then my second one was a 6 month stint with IBM down in North Carolina and learned, obviously a ton during that time frame, which we'll get into during the course of this call. Went back, finished my senior year and graduated and had a job offer from IBM. So moved down to North Carolina. And then, fast forward, life progressed, ended up coming back upstate, at some point around 2011 and used that as a catalyst to get my MBA because, I'd wanted to, I was looking at it, and then I really was kind of driven to come back to RIT and get my MBA because of how much I enjoyed the undergrad program and I wanted to leverage that experience. So I got my MBA. Now, at the time, obviously, it was a little more difficult given that I had kids, I was working full time, married, all those sorts of things that kind of come with it. So it was a slower slog to get through the MBA. But, again, really enjoyed that time, the coursework, the things that I used as a catalyst. Now, during that entire tenure, I've been at IBM in 2 months, it'll be 25 years. So I've had a lot of different roles under one company, and that's kind of the one thing that I like in a big company setting like that is that I have one paycheck, but in reality, the different business units act like different entities, and I've had a lot of different roles and opportunities and grown. And because of the MBA, I really use that as a catalyst to get into the product management space that I'm in today. So, I think that that was important to just kind of understand when you need to take another step and learn and jump out and take a new role.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate that. And Ken.
Yep. So hi everyone. My name is Ken Radziminski. I graduated and I had to actually check back. It's been a while, but undergrad was back in 2014 with a focus on marketing. So originally prior to RIT, I wanted to go more into something creative. So a musician. So that was my original plan back in the day, 2010. That didn't quite make it. So at that point, my pretty good fallback was the RIT marketing program because I was still able to use my creative side for my career, right? So obviously, to me, looking back, it turned out great. From there, the 4+1 program, I jumped into the MBA degree. Again, focused pretty heavily on marketing and visual communications, sticking with that creative side. And then I also have the interest in international business. So now kind of fast forwarding to where I am now, it's my degree was perfectly aligned with what has created success for my entire career. So following graduation in 2015, I jumped over to sports and entertainment as a business analyst for the Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team, the business side rather than the player side. And all my experience with that, primarily with leveraging Tableau to drive data and insights between marketing and sales. And that was more, of course, to the business to consumer side. And since then, I moved out to Sherwin-Williams manufacturing company and still focus a lot on that marketing to sales conversion, but more on the B2B side. So ultimately, using that creative storytelling to drive those insights, and then going back to what I mentioned about my international business focus or interest, now I work with folks in North America, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. So it's really trying to understand each of their markets, all the differences, some similarities, right? But again, trying to look at the problems that they're witnessing, and then collaborating with them to find areas of opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. And thank you all again for joining us. So we've had quite a few folks jump in the call here in the last couple minutes as we went through introductions. Just to reiterate, if you do have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll get to those. I'm also, after I ask this kind of first question to get us started, I'm going to spotlight all the panelists. So if things get a little wonky in your view, just know that that's why. So let's start with, obviously, all of you alluded to your career paths. So I'm curious how you feel your RIT education aided with your career track. So Mike, I'll start with you, and then we can kind of work our way around.
For me, the biggest outcome from the RIT was all the exposure to a lot of international community within RIT, as well as getting to know the nuts and bolts of finance and accounting, which were my majors. I didn't end up getting a traditional co-op during my RIT MBA, but I did my co-op with one of the RIT departments called Center for Computational Gravity and Research. They get a lot of NSF grants, and my coursework within finance in terms of how to handle the project finances actually helped me a lot to get through that co-op. And then I learned a lot about how to work with people and how to manage large teams and large budgets and things like that within that co-op program. So given that RIT was a great mix of all the different communities, all different coursework, as well as that opportunity for co-op I could get at RIT as well. I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, that I could meet a lot of people and then build that kind of uh, work ethic, and then interest in how to work with large teams and different groups of people, which I did not have before coming to RIT. So that was the biggest thing for me.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Great insights. Chris, what else would you add there?
I mean, to me, I think the kind of learning in each kind of step iterated on expanding the responsibility that I had to take from, when you go to undergrad and now you're in college. But all in all, the professors are still very helpful. They want to make sure that you're successful, they're willing to meet with you and things like that. And then the next step of that is getting into a co-op program where you're in the workforce and you're with people. I mean, it could be younger folks, it could be people that have been there for 30 years. And honestly, that was like my first experience in a professional work, situation where there was a huge scope of people there and different cultures and backgrounds and things coming together for kind of that common goal. So I think it was having the experience and then by doing different internships that I learned not only what I liked and what I wanted to do, but more importantly, what I didn't want to do. Because I took the first experience that I had and it helped me frame, I did not want to go down this particular path and to kind of broaden my scope to where I was looking and the things that I wanted to do. And I also think it's a little point in time difference when you think about, at your first co-op versus your second one, you've got more experience, a little more under your belt that you can take and then be a little more selective in picking it. So once I had that 6 month where I felt like I had learned so much, not only just real hands-on technology, but working with people that had real deadlines and dates to meet and things were critical and how to be professional and responsive and, all the things that are important to being successful to coming back, having my senior year. I had the job offer. I just needed to complete the degree, do some other interviewing just to see if there was something potentially better, but also, again, just another experience and having interviews, getting different inputs and perspectives coming at me. So I think each of those things all kind of built into getting me where I was ready to be successful.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Yeah, the piece about co-ops, knowing what you want to do, but also what you don't, and even just within an industry, what that looks like is critical. So appreciate that. And Ken, anything else that you would add?
Yeah, I'll jump on that too, because that was a note that I had where both my co-ops, it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, so it wasn't learning. But for both my co-ops, what I wasn't fully passionate about, if you want to call it that. And the interesting thing on my end was my first co-op was, and I know we're getting potentially a little ahead here, but my first co-op was actually in sports and entertainment and more traditional marketing. Which after that, I wasn't really feeling that type of work. But then ultimately, a few years later, when I did join, again, going into sports and entertainment, it was more on the data analysis side. So there was still that bit of marketing, but it was more calculated digital marketing, if you want to, focus on that side. So that was a huge advantageous piece for my co-ops. And then of course, bringing the experience back to class, talking through it, understanding what didn't I like, what did I like? Is there, can you mold a path based on that, or do you actually have to do a full 180 switch, right? So that was a good conversation. That was advantageous with my undergrad, primarily in that space. The other thing I wanted to throw in is the technology side. So a course in my senior year, and it's been a while, so it's systems analysis, potentially more management information systems focused rather than marketing, was a huge benefit to me. And that drove a path in my graduate degree, primarily focused on, again, Tableau software. Basically, my career has been driven on using one platform to the best of my ability more than a lot of others within my field. So really specializing in one very, again, very specific technology along with my creative storytelling has really driven my entire career. So I do say that in a lot of these calls where you might take 50 courses in grad and undergrad or around that. That one class or two courses that I took, I would credit probably 95% of my career to. So it's really finding what you love, taking that course, and then leveraging that course to drive your career.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, that's a great point. Building in those pathways and customizing it for what you want to do. Chris, if I could go back to you on project management. So we get a lot of students that come in and have interest in the project management space. What are some recommendations you have that students could do to help enhance that background in project management?
Well, project management, I think you just need to be extremely organized and make sure that you understand. You need to be in depth technically enough to be able to push back on different stakeholders that own things to understand timelines, because everyone kind of has this, built-in nature of adding in a buffer to when something will happen. So, I think that's the biggest thing is very clear communications, making sure that you can roll things up from, something very detailed in the weeds kind of planning to an executive summary, because, most of us don't have time to read through pages and pages of things. So really, let's kind of land your plane and really hit the high points of, what we're trying to accomplish. So I think, within my role today, we have different project managers that will help us on bigger, projects that take place, whether it's a deprecation of a service and making sure that we help transition customers from that service to something new or new versions or things like that. So there's a lot that goes into it from that then, report to me with product management, and we make sure that we get our analyst relations, our customer client success managers, the sales teams, to coordinate all the communications that go out and make sure that it is crisp and clear and we've not missed anyone in that entire process.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate that and those insights. So Ken, you alluded to some of this in terms of your favorite kind of business course. So Mike, I'll go to you first here. What do you recall any of your favorite business classes or any classes that you took at RIT and how they helped prepare you for your co-op and current role that you're in?
Right. So I'll branch off from the two that I mentioned prior, and I'll throw a third into the fire here. It was actually the first course I took at RIT. So this is undergrad. I'm not sure if there's a graduate equivalent. I'd be surprised if there wasn't, to be honest. So I'd assume so. But right away, it was 8 a.m. Monday, the first day back in quarter system. So I was also part of the quarters back in 2010. But it was a course where you would just come in and design your own business. So you start it, work on basically everything Chris was talking about. How do you sell it? How do you create it? Is it more tech? Is it more manufacturing? You're trying to predict sales and revenue, and trying to, of course, cut your costs and increase margin, right? And then it would be thrown into a type of computer program. I'm not sure the name of it. And then the next course, you'd come in and see how your product did in a 2-week 2-week timeline, right? Something along those lines. And then you would always try to predict what was happening. And then as a kid, you're like, oh yeah, we got this down. We did all the math. We figured everything out. And then something were to go wrong, right? So you come in here saying, all right, in our plant, we were creating our product. Something happened, put us behind on our timeline. How do we now make up for it? Who do we have to communicate with, and what types of levers do we have to move to catch up to where we were predicting, right? And then every class would be this. So you'd go through and creative problem solve, get back to the drawing board, try to predict what's going to happen for your next class that you'd have. And then are you're getting customer feedback? How are you adjusting your product based on that feedback? I mean, it is a real world scenario in a low risk environment. So that's the one outside of those other two that I mentioned that have really stuck with me now 15 years later.
Thanks, Ken. Yes, appreciate it. Yeah, we do integrate some of those simulations throughout both undergrad and the graduate program, so you get that hands-on exposure for sure. Mike, what would you add there from a class standpoint?
So for me, during my MBA, definitely the core accounting and finance classes I took helped me a lot throughout my career after RIT. But one of the class which stuck throughout and helped me a lot later in my career was this class I took with Professor Etley. I don't think he's around anymore.
He's still teaching as an adjunct. He's still floating around. Yeah.
So he had a class on tech strategy and innovations, and that was actually, I think, the only class in RIT at that time, which was based on the case solving. And if you look at other B schools, you'll see that a lot of classes are based on solving the cases. Even the core, very hardcore subjects like accounting are taught through solving cases, but that was not the case at RIT. So that class actually helped me a lot in terms of structured thinking, especially going into consulting later in my career. It helped me it helped me visualize how to problem solve some of the big issues for my clients, and then how to approach them from a case perspective. Because when you're moving from one short project to the other, it's it's a very different kind of world from what we call business as usual kind of work you do in different companies. So with those short projects, you need to have that case solving kind of aptitude where you quickly can understand the problem statement and then come up with some kind of solutions and metrics um, to basically help your whatever project you have undertaken. So that I think was one good class, and I would definitely suggest anyone if there are classes like that where professors are using case studies, and then especially in the area of tech innovations. So not only case studies, that also helped me understand a lot of basic principles of how the tech innovations work. Like, for example, I did not know a lot of things about how different companies came up. For example, even IBM, how they disrupted different industries and things like that. So, for example, a very basic definition of what is a disruptor. I did not know that before that class, actually. So that really helped me understanding those principles.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. And Chris, anything else that you want to add there?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that class, Mike, because, well, one, I have no recollection of any professor name, so that was a great pull. But I do remember that class, and I do remember, like, I was fascinated with disruptive technologies too, and the examples around like the computer hard drive and how like each next step in the iteration put the previous market leader out of business. So I had forgotten about that until you mentioned it. So thank you. From me, couple points that I wanted to mention as we're talking about classes. Like we're all guilty of looking at your schedule and thinking, this isn't really applicable to me. I'm not going to be in marketing, for example, like Ken, but I can promise you that what I learned in my marketing MBA class helped in some form or fashion, because now as we're going to market and thinking about, how to be successful and how to reach and grow the top of market funnel, like what are some of the strategies? And yeah, I'm not going to implement all of those things, but it's very important to have some awareness of them. Or financial, as you're building out your P&Ls for your business and your services, to have that understanding. For me, the two biggest courses that I wanted to mention, one, competitive strategy in the MBA, which, obviously kind of helps resonate, define how you compete in the market, what are different strategies that you do, looking at the different use cases. And then the second one was around user design. And so today I work very closely, we call it three in a box. So it's me from a product management perspective, our design team, and then our development or engineering team. So we're constantly working together to define the best user experience to drive, adoption, to build in operational characteristics to what we're so the customer can focus on what's important to them because it's not running these cloud services. It's delivering some line of business objective, some capability that'll help drive outcomes for them. So how do we make it easier to do so? And whether it's, a lovely point and click UI or it's some automation from the API or something else. So those are kind of the two main classes that I felt were very beneficial and resonate with me literally every day.
Great, thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. All right, so we'll kind of wrap up with one last scripted oriented question, and then we'll get to the questions that our audience has, as we have a nice group here. So again, please feel free to put those questions in the chat, or when we get there, you can certainly unmute yourself as well. But yeah, simply put, this last one, why did you choose RIT and the Saunders College of Business for graduate study? And Mike, I'll start with you on that one.
So after my undergrad and in India, I was working for a company which was trying to build some real estate portfolio in India, and I was trying to work with them in terms of project financing, project planning. And at that time, I was looking for doing an MBA just so that I can actually um, get out there and then try to look for some bigger companies and then try to get more exposure in terms of especially technology. So, and that was the time, it was really very close after the whole financial crisis in 2008. I started my MBA in 2010. So the market prospects in terms of getting a job were not that great. In fact, they were much worse than even when I graduated in 2012 than what they are right now. And I know some of the students must be feeling that, the market's not that great, but I think at least Chris and I went through that phase and that time when, there were basically no jobs. So at that time, it was a difficult decision in terms of cost as well as what you're getting out of your degree. So my main focus was that I want to get as much exposure as possible, as much tech side of work, tech side of connections I can make within this time period I do my MBA, and all of those considerations actually helped me make that decision at that time.
Thank you, Mike. And Chris?
For me, like I kind of touched on earlier, it was, coming back to Rochester for a stint and thinking about kind of having plateaued in my career path that I was in information technology. And I had done a lot of different roles from networking to security and, virtualization at the time and different things. So, and I love being very technical and hands-on, but I wanted to then progress more to the strategy side of the business. And I used getting my MBA as the catalyst to go out and look and kind of find a new career path. So I looked, obviously was very familiar with RIT from my undergrad work. Um, Looked into the MBA, saw, all the different courses that were available that I felt would be applicable to, the next step in my career path. And so it was really, for me, a no-brainer to come in and make that investment in myself to go and do the MBA. Now, when I completed my undergrad, it was a little different situation just financially for me to um, you know, I had the job offer, like I said before, taking on at that time another year of tuition and kind of delay hitting the workforce wasn't quite as, feasible. So that's why I didn't do kind of a 4+1. And I think everyone should factor into you what's important because I'm kind of going through it right now. My son is in his last year slash doing his master's and you know, where we are, it's easier for him to just keep rolling while you're in the grind of school and finish up with the masters. So I think, just depending on it. Now, when you're taking master's level of courses, if you have real work experience, a lot of that for me got reused into those courses. So it just kind of, again, everyone's situation is a little bit different, but I can promise that making the selection of a master's degree at RIT was definitely the right one for me.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I appreciate that. That comes up a lot. Students, whether, jumping right in with a 4+1 pathway, which is becoming more and more popular, or, getting some work experience. And I think, again, you have to make the choice and personal choice for you that works. So appreciate that advice. And Ken, anything else you want to add?
Yeah. So my big piece, and I'm more focused on undergrad with my answer here, but it was the job placement rate. So I'm thinking even as a kid, what's my ROI? Like where am I going to get the most experience for the cost of college? And as I mentioned early in the call, it was coming down to two different career paths. And ultimately, I mean, the final decision came down to job placement rate, where another program at a different university, they were still doing internships 2-3 years after graduation, where RIT specifically, the business college, I think it was 94-95% job placement rate. And that's, I believe that if the stats still the same, 3 months from graduation, you're working in a job within your graduated field. So to me, that was, I mean, on paper, the easiest decision I've ever made. For the 4+1, I did jump, again, going off of what Chris said, a little different. I jumped right into it. Again, thinking of that ROI, knowing I can stay here. I've already passed out of a few courses because of my undergrad degree, so I am able to knock it out in 1 year, keep that momentum of education going. And then when I graduate from the master's, again, more likely than not, I'll be using what I learned in my MBA to drive my career forward. And I mean, looking back at it, everything fortunately worked out, as ideal as possible. So I do see the benefit though, because I've talked to a few other people looking at the 4+1, and there is that weight of jumping in because you do have that momentum, which is a huge positive. But I do think there's that little bit of lesser knowledge based on not having that career example. But there's pros and cons of both sides, so I don't think one is too weighed over the other. It's just preference for sure.
For sure, yeah. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. All right, we have about 15-20 minutes left. So at this point, I would love to take some questions from our attendees. So does anyone have questions that they'd like to ask? And if you do, feel free to unmute yourself. All right, I do have one that was directly sent to me. All right, so what, and I'll open this up to anybody. What topics or subjects should I brush up on or be well versed with before the MBA? My background, I'm an engineer and I'm working as a business development executive in cloud. So any thoughts there?
Well, it sounds right up my alley for what you're doing, so that's awesome. I think I don't know if, to be honest, I don't know if the GMAT is still required.
It's not. Well, I shouldn't say that. International students do have to take it. Domestic students do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So depending on where you're coming from, if you have to do the GMAT, then I would definitely invest in, well, for me, I invested in some books, this books at the time. So I got physical books and studied and prepared and went and took my GMAT. to get in. And to be honest with you, I didn't do any other further kind of preparation ahead of time. Regardless of formal education or just like reading things and playing with new technologies, whether it's Gen AI or whatever, like I've always liked to learn. So for me, being in, a formal education, I love it. Like I'd go back and get a different degree in something else just because I like that aspect of it. So I think it's just making sure that when you're coming back for the masters, that it's going to take a lot of time and effort, and to carve that out so you can do it and do it well and do it like in a timely manner, because all of your classes will be team and project based. So, I always wanted to be kind of the first one getting the draft of something out or my piece done, because I don't like to wait for the last second. So that's my biggest tip, whether it's at work or at school.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Chris. And I would echo what Chris said. Obviously, if you have to take the exam, prep, obviously, and it can lead to more scholarships. So keep that in mind. But other than that, we don't ask for you to necessarily come in with any prereqs or anything like that. MBA is designed to be a generalist degree. So we're not expecting, outside of a little bit of math in your background, and if you have some stats, that helps. But otherwise, there's no specific requirements necessarily that you have to come in with. Great, thank you. And then Ken, I'll throw you this next one. Could you please talk about a marketing campaign where you used analytics heavily? What tools and techniques did you apply?
Yeah, so it's a great question because I'm right in the middle of it this morning, actually. So I'll jump right into the second part of that, the tools. And I'm reading right off of our what our team works on. So I don't work primarily on these tools, but I assist the teams that do work in these tools. So I have to know there's a certain minimum that I need to know working with a tool. But Google Tag Manager, Dataiku, which is more of a data like blending tool, if you want to call it that. Google Analytics 4 we work in. Sprout Social. So now we're getting into more of the marketing channel, like Sprout Social, LinkedIn Campaign Manager, Google Ads, Google Search Console. So there's an entire suite of marketing channel information. I work a lot with CRM programs, so Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics for CRM. And it's on my past company, we went from Microsoft to Salesforce. So I had to work with the data, bringing it over from those two platforms. And now in my current role, we're doing the reverse. So I'm getting both sides of that conversion. And then Marketo for email. So I do a lot of email analysis too. So really what I do to bring that all together for the marketing campaign, and I can even get into a little bit of the role that I work with now, is we have our data analytics team, and then we have a bunch of stakeholders, one for email and social, and then one for search marketing. And then, so there's somewhat of our stakeholders too, because we work along with them and collaborate. And then we have divisions of Sherwin-Williams, again, more on the business side. So aerospace, automotive, even metal roofing, and a side that people don't think Sherwin is involved in. It's more of DIY paint projects, right? So it's a whole new industry that I've before I started a year ago, didn't really know about. So an example of a marketing campaign would be automotive coming to us and saying, hey, we have at our industrial paint stores, and not the consumer paint stores, but automotive plants would go to their specific stores. So we'd have a sale. How's the marketing of the sale? How are the social efforts to create awareness? Again, this is an awareness campaign, so defining that type of campaign is huge. And then how much traffic drove to the website? Where do they come from? What are they interacting with? How many form fill conversions do we have? So there's a bunch of different campaign focuses. So again, this one was primarily the awareness with driving a few conversions over to a contact us form fill. But basically what I do as an analyst is I bring all these separate pieces together. So how did we do on social and email? Let's create a story there. How does that story match what we did on search with what people are searching for when they're searching for our promotion? And then we work with the marketing team specifically. We make recommendations to them as a collaborative group. And then the biggest piece of that is not just a recommendation, but is tracking that going forward. And then the next time we would do a similar project, which is going to be in September, we can make some of those recommendations and then do that A/B testing to see what works, what doesn't work, and how can we improve it next time, right? So the biggest thing, the takeaway from this, and I know it's a long-winded answer here, is there's a lot of tools. So it's balancing knowing all the tools, but not needing to know the full effect of each tool. So when I go into these meetings, I know a certain level, and my focus is more on bringing us all together in storytelling. But over time, I've had to learn that I'm not going to know as much about email and social as the email and social team. So the way that we work together is they'll deliver some of their results, and then I'll ask questions, and we'll go back and forth and collaborate in a way that leaving that meeting, we're both in a different space of what that success might look like, right? So when it comes to, like you mentioned, like what tools and techniques, having an entry level knowledge of a broad range of tools is very valuable, but you don't want to learn too much of it because then you're at full capacity, right? So the way that I balance that is Tableau and storytelling is my specialty, but I do know enough of each person's individual area to help them out and to add to the conversation.
Sorry, I was muted there. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. Those insights. That's great stuff. All right, other questions that that folks have? And again, feel free to unmute yourself too if you'd like, if that's easier.
Matt, real quick, I have one more note that I'd like to mention is a question that I get a lot, and I'm sure others have it too. But it was what was the comparison between grad school and undergrad as far as difficulty, right? And it's hard to compare the two. So for undergrad, for me, and again, what a lot of people say, it's more task oriented. It's more reading, memorizing, knocking out the homework. It's the joke is always reading is the homework, so there's no homework type of thing. I heard that a lot as an undergrad student, and then it completely flips for grad school. Basically, all your homework is not all of it, but maybe 70% is reading, and you can either decide to read or not. But basically, what you're deciding there is, do I actually want to learn something from the program? So graduate, well, it's easier to get. I would say easier to get a better grade. It's all about what you're willing to put into it is what you're going to get out of it. So that's a big difference. It's a huge difference between undergrad. I do think it's almost a complete flip. You do have some of those larger projects, but yeah, a lot of your homework is reading case studies and going to class and discussing. And you can go to class and just sit there and not discuss anything, but then you're not learning, right? So it's almost, grad school is almost about holding yourself accountable for learning rather than people, taking you by the hand and forcing you to learn.
Those are great points. Mike or Chris, anything else you want to add there? Because I get that question very frequently. So I'm curious how you would address that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's much more project and team based in the graduate level courses to kind of get you ready for real life. Like the reality is, to Ken's point, like you maybe know a ton in a particular area, but you're rarely going to be working on something yourself. It's in a cross collaboration. How does your piece that you're an expert in tie into these other, 10, 20 pieces, whatever the case may be? So, and it's also the challenge, and this is real life as well, is taking, if you have 5 people on your team, taking those 5 distinct pieces and contributions and making it seem like one cohesive project. Because I literally do this every day as well, where I have different teams and they're submitting After this call, I've got a QBR, a quarterly business review, and I don't want it to look like four different teams submitted content for our financials and our, whatever other metrics that we're tracking. So it's a big part of it is really just figuring out how to work collaboratively and, get a common goal accomplished.
Thank you, appreciate that. And Mike, anything else you would add there? Difference between undergrad and grad in your
Yeah,
experience?
definitely similar themes. It's more about how much initiative you want to take in your grad program. Especially for me, when I came from India, there was for me in undergrad, you're supposed to read all your books, you're supposed to do a lot of homework, you're supposed to memorize a lot. But here it was completely different for me. And then initially it was almost like a culture shock for me where I had to organize myself. I had to make sure that I'm doing my work, which was not the case for me in the undergrad because every possible step, my teachers were grading me at every single thing. But the biggest difference I found was that the professors here were more interested in discussion in the class rather than actually going over the concepts, which was definitely different from an undergrad program where you're going through the concepts, you're trying to learn those concepts. Here, you're supposed to learn all the concepts yourself and then come prepared to the class to discuss those to get more out of those. So I think that's the biggest difference in terms of both the levels.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect summation is the learning is incumbent upon you. You have to understand the concepts and then come into the class ready to discuss that. Now, if you don't, you can rely on the faculty, go to office hours and get some additional support, but you really do have to come in ready to tackle that stuff in the classroom. So I appreciate that.
Well, and there's a big part of learning that comes from that. When I did mine, it was like blended. Some were online classes and some were actual face-to-face in the classroom. And you learn just as much from the other students who
Exactly.
may have different experience or perspective or lines of work. And when they talk about the same topic, that it just kind of resonates differently, or it did for me at least, hearing it from someone else with, those different life and work experiences.
Yeah. Yes, that's a great point as well. And we have a pretty diverse graduate student population. So right now we're about 40% international at the graduate level. Lots of students from India, but also China, South America, African countries. So a lot of diversity there and diversity of work experience too, whether it's, significant amount of professional experience, some really strong co-op experiences, or a little lesser, but there's still that value out there as well. So yeah, so all great insights there. Thanks for bringing that forward, Ken. Appreciate that. But yeah, other questions here? We can take probably one more as we wrap up. And if not, that's okay too. All right, so let's end with this then. What's as our students, so a lot of these students that are attending today are either potentially committed to RIT or still making that decision, right, of what they're going to do, where they might end up going. And as they go through the process, what is kind of one piece of advice you would give as these students kind of prepare for, graduate school or getting, kind of down to that decision-making process?
For me, I think I would just say network as much as possible, try to meet as many people as you can, um, which helped me personally a lot. So get involved in different clubs, meet, take advantage of RIT events outside of Rochester, maybe, and things like that. So those could be a great advantage if you know a lot of people.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I think Ken nailed it earlier talking about the ROI for the investment. And to my next point around, just make the most of it, whether it's, you know, doing clubs and events and doing career fairs and talking to just different people and getting different insights and, meeting with professors during office hours I tell my son this all the time, like even if you're not stumped on something, show up, make sure that they know who you are and that you are invested as much in this class and your education as they are being there. And that will go a long way if something does get very challenging, and just to, leverage those relationships and work with when you're in classes, figure out, who you think you can partner well with and who, you know, is as motivated as you are to be successful and get it done on the timelines that you want.
Yeah, going back, really just the ROI. So even with my continued education that I have now, anytime I'm going into maybe a 4 or 6 week course, 8 week course, I decide not to do a longer course because I know, all right, I have a capacity of 6 weeks to really focus on a subject. I know if I take a 6 month course right now, I'm going to start after a couple months start to decline in my focus just because of where I am in life right now. So it's understanding, all right, here's the timeline of what I'm going to commit to. Here's why I'm interested in doing the program, and then really committing to yourself mentally. All right, I'm going to go in here, use all the resources that we've all talked about today, and I'm going to strive to get the best outcome possible. So I think it is that mental aspect of you're diving in, you're going to hold yourself accountable, and you're going to get as much out of it as possible.
Yes, thank you, Ken. And Ken nailed the 95% earlier. That is still accurate. I didn't pay him to say that. That is correct. So that's within 3 to 6 months of graduation. So 95% of our students have a job in their discipline at that point. And you can actually explore our website by program as well. We list by program what the outcomes rates are. So feel free to do that. And then take a look at that stuff, because ultimately that's what it boils down to, right? And that's why we're here. We want to prepare you for those opportunities. All right. Well, I really appreciate Mike, Chris, and Ken joining. All right, Mike, I have a question here about consulting that just came in. So timely. So the first part I'm not 100% sure on is their consulting focused club at RAT. We do have Saunders Consulting Group, which we could talk about offline. But anything that you just want to add kind of high level from a consulting perspective before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I was not involved in any consulting clubs at RIT during my time, and that probably was not a great decision on my part. Um, but as far as consulting goes, I think it really helps that if you focus on taking some classes which are case studies focused, they help you um, apply your understanding in terms of how to problem solve different areas. Also, I would definitely I'll just use this as a plug to look at the other talk we did on consulting career. One of the big things I missed actually during my RIT days was that I did not prepare well enough for my interviews. I did not know how to answer questions in different formats. Companies are expecting you to do how to solve different aptitude tests they throw at you, or how to have some of the other assignments they give you before any job interview. So I think that might be very helpful to look into throughout your time, because that's the time you can use to prepare yourself before you actually start doing interviews and anything else. And there's a ton of resources available these days to prepare yourself for the interviews. And consulting interviews are a little bit different than normal industry interviews. So I think that's something you want to look at before you actually start applying for those positions.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I'm going to actually, I'll send it out afterwards, the link to the session you did on consulting, which was awesome. We do have a lot of classes that use real company data sets as well. So that's something that we really do integrate quite a bit into the program and coursework as well. So you'll see that too. All right, but I appreciate, again, great questions. Appreciate everybody joining us. And thanks again to mine, Chris and Ken. Really appreciate your time. But it was great connecting with you all, and we'll be in touch. And if you have any questions going forward, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.